summers, there's a great dance, one in each district, each month of the summer. And I was working in Acclimation Recreation Department when I was in college. We decided that the theme of the dance would be a university campus. And when we were putting together the various decorations, and we had to have a name for not only the dance, but what we did there. And so Julie Tyndall, Karen Hansen, and I, in planning it, thought up a team, and we called it the Scuba Team. And the Scuba Team meant the semi-civilized, underprivileged brats of Aramco. Our parents heard it the night of the dance because we made up cheers like at a football game. And they glommed on to, they loved the underprivileged, and they loved the brats, and the brats stuck.
I think the term Aramco brat is an important one. That sounds bad, but it's not bad.
They were natural kids living a natural life of world citizenship.
The world for us as brats is tiny.
I've met people from many other places, and I've talked to them about where they come from and why it's important to them, and no one I've ever met has the experience of being in a place as Saudi Arabia is to brats, been as important.
I lived in Saudi Arabia for a while, and everybody's kind of, whoa.
As an education for a young child,
oh God, traveling the world.
It was unique.
Growing up in Saudi Arabia was not unlike growing up in a small town in the USA, other than the fact that we were in a different country with a different culture.
Well, the unique thing was living outside of the United States, but we also had the culture of living within the Aramco compounds.
We had a small compound, everybody knew each other, and because you all know each other, you tend to treat each other with more respect and basic consideration.
We had a lot of freedom because there was virtually nothing to be afraid of, so our parents kind of let us run, which we did.
And for me, the biggest impact of being there was the education that we had. There was an amazing amount of the world opened up to us.
We're exposed to a lot of other cultures and languages, customs, etc., that so many people in this country today have no inkling of what life is like outside the United States.
We know that there are no limitations in terms of getting somewhere or learning about some other place, and we're not afraid to learn about other places or, new people or new things or new ideas or strange ideas.
A lot of us Aramcos are a little bit more complex, not than the average person, but I think that we ourselves have times trying to figure out who the hell we are. I don't know, maybe this will be a good way to help us figure out where we're coming from.
I think the media should be talking to people who lived in Saudi Arabia, who know what real Saudis are like and where their hearts are.
What a wonderful, warm group of people that they really are.
It's definitely a unique experience. I've always felt very special.
Yeah, we are grateful to our adventurous parents because they gave that to us.
I'm grateful to Aramco for allowing us this experience.
Right, great company.
Yeah, very special.
They know they've had a privileged upbringing in a lot of ways.
Well, if we were spoiled in any sense, I think it's because we saw so much and we wanted to see more.
But it was the only life we knew. I mean, when I'd go back to the States on our vacations, I couldn't wait to go home.
I still think of it as home, at least for my childhood years.
If I were a writer, I might be able to write a substantial book, and a book that could really get the flavor, and maybe this is the best way to do it, through a documentary where people can really let you know how they feel about where they've been.
truly understand Aramco Brats, you need to first understand the environment we grew up in. It's imperative that you know a little about Saudi Arabia and its history as a nation. It began at the turn of the 20th century when Abdul Aziz ibn Saud unified the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula and won back the ancestral capital of the Al Saud dynasty by seizing Riyadh. Through the divine inspiration of Allah, it became Abdul Aziz's dream to build a strong and powerful kingdom to protect the birthplace and home of his Islamic faith. To do so meant to tap the vast wealth of Saudi Arabia in order to build a solid infrastructure from which Saudi Arabia would grow and develop alongside with other great nations. After officially being declared king of Saudi Arabia in 1932, King Abdul Aziz invited American oil companies to the kingdom to search for water and black gold. 6 long years of searching ended on March 3, 1938, when oil was discovered, and by his own hand, the king himself turned the pumps on in 1939. By 1951, the need for a national oil company gave birth to Aramco. What many people do not realize is that the Americans and Saudis that helped form Aramco were some of the most brilliant of thoughtful men. They were visionaries who sought not to follow in the steps of other Western countries that made habit out of exploiting their fellow nations. These men saw a future of coexistence. It was Aramco, Arabian-American oil company, and it was a beautiful partnership. It was Saudis and Americans working together for the common good of their countries and the world. Many a gallon of Saudi oil kept the world from bowing to the fascist regimes of Europe during World War II. The partnership had become a friendship and an epic example of alliance. This was how nations should conduct themselves. It was Tom Barger who initially put that sentiment into words and instilled it in the hearts and minds of all those who call themselves Aramcons and Aramco Brats.
My father went to Saudi Arabia in 1937. He was one of the first dozen geologists to go into Saudi Arabia and see what they had in their concession, within the concession. And he landed in Saudi Arabia. He didn't know anything about Saudi Arabia, barely knew where it was. Took a motor launch from Bahrain over to Al Khobar. First thing he saw was the camp. That afternoon, he came back, went to Al Khobar, and there were 2 giant tents and about 5,000 Arabs with knives and guns and rifles and swords and all kinds of tribal weapons. The occasion was the visit of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Saud bin Abdulaziz, and he had come to meet the Sheikh of Bahrain. The political significance was that the Sheikh of Bahrain was already pumping oil, and that Abdulaziz and his son Saud hoped that soon they would be pumping oil, but by then, still, they didn't have any oil. Because they had drilled something like 10 dry wells, and they were losing faith. They had one more well in production, well, not in production, they were drilling it, and basically, if they didn't find any oil, they were going to close down the concession. So my father arrived, and about a week later, he went into the desert for 3-4 months, lived with the 15 Bedouin. He really got to know Bedouins and Arabs, and they had nothing to do except run around and then all night long talk around campfires and that kind of thing. And so my father real quickly learned Arabic and got to know these men. And he thought it was terrific because they weren't changed. I mean, these men, except for gunpowder and raw sugar, they were living like Moses lived. And I tell you all this because that's where my father figured out what was going on in Saudi Arabia. And he was a junior geologist at the time, and later in his career, he rose higher and higher until eventually he was the CEO. But throughout the whole process, he always knew who those Saudis were. They were not foreign people. They were real people that he knew heart to heart. And I think that's what distinguished his whole career was whenever there was a conflict between an employee, a Saudi employee, and the company, 99% of the time, my dad went with the Saudi Arab because he understood what they were trying to do. So while he was doing that, I was growing up. When I was about 6, I think Dhahran probably went to 10th Street then. And after that was nothing between Dhahran and Al-Khobar. And there was no fence. And you'd wake up in the morning and jackals would be roaming through town. And it was pretty wild. But as a kid, it was absolutely terrific because you were just out the door and gone into the desert and with all your buddies and get into all kinds of trouble and run around. And it was fantastic.
It was an unbelievable experience. We came from Boston, Massachusetts, never had any experience being in the desert or a warm climate like that. Getting off that airplane was in July of '52 was unbelievable. It must have been 300 degrees when they opened the door.
And it was so hot that I thought my sister and I were just going to melt in these big heavy coats coming down. But there was a very unique smell about Saudi Arabia. It's hard to say, but warm air, and desert air has a particular smell.
I remember the first breath of air I ever took in Arabia, and it was like being in a hot, dry oven, and I couldn't breathe. Once we got to our house, it was like, this is great.
I went over there in 52, 53, 54, 55, 59, 64, and 2000.
And when I tell people that I went to Arabia, I tell them I went pre-jet, and they look like, she must really be ancient.
My dad went over in 1946, and we came over in 1948 on the Flying Camel. And still had bunk beds in the back of the plane at that time. So Mother and I and the kids, my sister and I got to sleep in the bunk bed on the plane. It took about 3 days to get there because you're going in a 2-engine piston-powered plane.
When we got ready to go over there, Aramco was not flying. So we took a 12-passenger freighter from New York City through the Suez Canal, ran aground. They had to unload the freighter, and then we went around the Saudi Peninsula and got off in Ras Tanura. So that was about, I guess, a month's trip. And driving from Ras Tanura to Abqaiq, I said, because I had in Kansas City a sand pile. I said, oh, can I have a sandbox when we get here? Of course, little did I know our whole yard was a sandbox.
My parents were really excited about moving to Saudi Arabia because of our Arabic background. I'm Palestinian. So that was kind of neat, to get, I guess, a chance to experience the Arabic lifestyle that I had not had a chance to encounter in Chicago.
I didn't know what to expect when I moved there because when I moved there, the night I got there, it was pouring rain, thunder, lightning, small house, strange country, and then I wake up at 5:30 to prayer call. It took me a little while to get acclimated to where I was, made friends with the kids outside the camp, and once we found out we both had one thing in common, which was soccer. It was great. We were playing soccer all the time. Parents would send me out to Rahima, pick stuff up, be gone for hours, come home, I wouldn't be chastised, where were you? Did you find everything okay? Oh yeah, everything was fine. It was just a great place, great people.
The best thing about Saudi is the wonderful open, clean air, and the people that we met, and the Saudi people that we met, the Persian Gulf. It's unmatched.
We are among a very privileged group of people, of foreigners, who have been able to visit and travel to and live in Saudi Arabia and get to know their people and get to know their culture.
They were extremely nice to us, all the Saudis. They always were very nice.
My father and I were driving from Dhahran to Abqaiq, I believe, and my dad was a geologist, so we often stopped by the side of the road so he could show me geodes or interesting formations and things. And there just happened to be a Bedouin tribe there coming towards us. And a little girl about the same age as me came over to me, and I had very blonde hair, and we couldn't speak each other's language, but we kind of exchanged handshakes, and she gave me a silver ring, and it was so valuable to me because I think it might have been the only piece of jewelry she owned.
We'd run into the Bedouins every now and then when we were out on these trips, and that was wonderful. I mean, the first thing they would do is make camp and build a fire and make coffee for you, and you had to sit down and have coffee and tea with them, you know. And I've still got photographs of me and my brother when we're just really little, just doing that, you know, sitting there with this Bedouin who's got daggers or everything, and, you know, just handing us coffee, you know.
You would go back to the States every summer, and we'd come back with all the new clothes and all the new cool music, and then our Arab friends who had gone back to Lebanon or wherever they went, and we'd like come back and we'd all exchange music and exchange clothes and exchange everything, and it was like kind of like what we did. We never thought twice about it.
You know, we'd socialize, we'd talk, and I got to see a whole nother side that I never would have been exposed to if I hadn't been on Aramco, especially as a Saudi. I had access to China. I had access to India. I had access to the Persian culture. I had access to Buddhist beliefs. I had access to everything I could ever want within the world I had in a small community.
We would go into the local villages like Dammam and Khobar and Thugba and Qatif, and these municipal leaders of these small villages would have these goat grabs for us where they would kill a lamb, and we'd sit in a room on the floor, and the lamb would be there with the rice and all sorts of vegetables, and we'd sit with our legs crossed, and you'd have to eat with your right hand. You weren't allowed to eat with your left hand. And we really couldn't speak a lot of Arabic, but through sign language and facial expressions, we were able to communicate and understand each other, and it really developed a bond between the Americans that were there and the Saudis.
I remember going out to a Desert Dogs experience, which basically we brought 10,000 soldiers out in the desert, food for, I don't know if it was Christmas or Thanksgiving, but all of these people gathered together, donations, and created this huge meal and brought it out to, the barracks out in the desert. I remember one of the people who came with me was a good friend of mine, Salaam, and just like other Western members of our community, Wasim rather, being a Palestinian, also had an extreme amount of appreciation for the soldiers. And even though it was the holy month of Ramadan and he was fasting, Wasim went out to the desert. He fed the soldiers all day long in 125-degree heat without drinking a drop of water, eating a touch of food, all with a smile on his face, like all with graciousness and appreciation and love. And I think that that sort of, cross-cultural, cross-ethnic unity that's shown there is like outstanding. And when you start looking at the things that bring us apart and the diversity and the struggles, they are meaningless compared to the enormity of these cultural sacrifices and these cultural experiences that we can really meld together and feel. That's appreciation.
The generosity, the originality, the hospitality was phenomenal. And I think that's true today even. They're very proud of their heritage, and they're very proud of who they are. And for me, that made me even more proud to have been able to meet them.
When I was about 5 years old, this King Saud came to, Ibn Saud, the old king, came to Dhahran, and he agreed to meet all the women and children. And all the children, I was 5, and we were all lined up, and we were allowed to go up and shake his hand. And it was really very impressive, because you go up and there are all the guards with all their artillery and everything protecting the king, and you're told to go up and you walk, and you reach out your little hand, and this is this big hand. And I can remember he wasn't a guy who just sat around and did nothing. He had a really rough hand, but I can remember how tiny my hand felt in the hand, and it was really nice. It was a lot of fun.
Best memories I had was when the king gave me a horse, because mine had pulled up lame. And I had always ridden in the gymkhanas and stuff, and they were used to seeing me out there. And he asked one day, because I was riding somebody else's horse, what happened to my little white horse? A week later, I had 3 horses come from Riyadh by train for me.
and I thought that was just fantastic.
My dad was visiting the Emir and Hufuf, who is a princely family, and that was before the old walls, for the most part, were knocked down. They still had the old citadel and battlements, and the Medjlis was a room about 50 or 60 feet long with the rugs rolled out in the middle, and the Emir in his chair at the end receiving not only us, but other petitioners, citizens, businessmen.
And there'd be all the cushions along the walls for you to sit on.
And his guia were lined up along the walls.
It was very much holding court, just like, you know.
In our lifetimes, to see it, the tradition, the nobility of it has never left me.
This is a story that's been told by family members for a number of years. Ricky was about 5 years old, and he had just arrived in Dhahran, and the king was coming to town. And when the king came to town, he would bring his whole entourage of servants and a couple of wives, and everybody would come out, and they would stay at Hamilton House. And the servants would take their tents, and they'd set up tents all around Hamilton House. So you'd have tons of people with tents that looked like a nice little Arab scene in the middle of Dhahran on the greens of the yard of Hamilton House. So Ricky had just been to Sunday school. He was very excited about the prospect of meeting the king, because of course Ricky confused the king with Jesus. So he was sure that Jesus had come to town. And he comes home from Sunday school, and he calls his best friend, Chris Lonis, whose father was a doctor in town. And he said, "Chris, come, we must go to see Jesus." So they went in their finest Sunday school clothes, and they walked up to the front door, and they knocked on the door, and the guard looked at him and said, "Go away, little kids. We're here to see the king. You go away, he's busy." And so Ricky and Chris walked away, and not to be, turned away, they decided that they would try a different tact to see the king, because this was a chance of a lifetime. So they went home, and again, my mother is happily playing bridge, and she's oblivious to anything that's going on. And they put on their little cowboy hats, their holster and gun, and this was a John Wayne era, and they had their holsters and guns and cowboy boots. So they went back to the Hamilton House, and this time they drew their guns on the guard, and they said, "We're here to see the king." And the guard was so surprised and sort of a little amused, I think, that when he said, "Just a minute, this persistence might pay off," he walked back in, and a few minutes later came out and said, "The king will see you." And so Ricky and Chris just walked right in there, and they each sat on a leg of the king, and they talked for, I understand, at least 30 minutes. At the end of this talk, the king thanked them very much, because this is very much the Saudi hospitality. It is an honor when you go to their house, when you go to visit them. And as one of, to thank you for coming to visit me, I would give you a gift. And he ended up giving them each a pouch of 10 gold sovereigns each. A little leather pouch, and they, each a little bag of coins. And they happily ran off, thanked the king, went off directly to the candy store, the Fiesta Room, and they put their 2 pouches on the counter and said, "We want this much candy." Well, of course, the little guy that I'm not sure how much he made, but he looked at that and he just emptied out the candy and gave it all to the 2 kids and took the 20 gold sovereigns, never to be seen again. My mother, now still playing bridge, gets a telephone call, and somebody says, "Peggy, do you realize that Ricky is on the playground passing out candy to all the children?" And, she wanted to make sure Mother was aware that he was providing everybody in the community with candy. And of course, Mother didn't know where he would get the money, so she ran over and asked Ricky where he'd gotten the money. And he said, "Jesus gave it to me." And Mother knew Ricky never lied, and she's trying to figure it out. Now, Ricky, where did you get the money? Well, it finally came out that it was the king who had given him the money. So Mom called Dad and said, I think your son just had a meeting with the king. And sure enough, Dad confirmed it. And that's the story.
I love that camel and tent question that people give you when they find out that you live in the Middle East, you know. Oh, do you ride a camel to work or school, and do you live in a tent? So, well, I live in Qatar now, so I get the same questions even to this day.
I think each camp had their own personality. I'd say Dhahran compared to New York City, it was the main hub, had the airport and all that stuff, and that's where even when my dad would say, oh, I'm going to Dhahran today for work, I'm like, oh, that's gotta be cool, and got a company car with the number 57 on the side or whatever. And then usually it was just, I don't know, I want to compare it to, I'm big into music, so I'd say Red Rocks, Colorado, because that was the most desertish kind of camp we had. It had the Jebels that were very prominent in the middle of the city, not outside. And then RT, come on, what can you say? That's just the beach. I mean, it's like Cali right there. And then you got Acclimation.
It was a great place to grow up. Everyone, it was almost idyllic as a childhood place to grow.
I always tell people when they ask me what it was like, I always tell them it was kind of like living in Mayberry. Because it was very similar to what I used to see on, the old Andy Griffith show. It's just that it was in Arabia instead of Mayberry.
Every single one of the houses is exactly the same. I mean, there was minor differences. Like one of my friends John would move and he'd be like, hey, come check out my new house. You'd be like, oh, sweet, the stairs are on the other side.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It was great living there as a family. A lot of precautions that families might take with their children here in the States weren't taken there in Saudi Arabia. And I think I had a lot more freedom there than I would have over here.
I never felt that I was just, a foreigner or a new person over there. Enjoyed it very much.
There seemed like something going on all the time. It never seemed to be old. Always something new.
It was a utopia. We could go out in the morning, and at 12 o'clock whistle, you came home and had lunch. And then you could go out all day, and you came home at 5 o'clock when the whistle blew because you knew dinner was on the table. You went to the pool all day, the movies, you could do whatever you wanted, and your parents didn't have to worry. You just raced out the door, and that was the end of the day,
Our work week was Saturday through Wednesday. Yeah. Thursday and Friday, that was the party time.
Yeah.
So
that was the good times, man.
Yeah.
You could just walk around, and you probably walked all over the camp in an hour. It's that small, and everyone knows each other, and I don't know, everyone's just like your family, you just walk in the house and everyone's fine with it. They're not shocked to see someone in their house.
No one would call you in the morning from a cell phone and be like, hey, what are you doing? They'd come to your house and they'd wake you up, or they'd be like, get in the car, we're going to the beach, we're going to camp out all night, stay up all night, whatever. And they never had to question, because friends were always welcome. Every door was open. It's not like doors were locked, and friends would just run into your house, jump on your bed and be like, let's go. Let's go see where the life takes us today.
If you wanted to survive on camp, you needed your feet, a skateboard, roller skates, a bicycle, or a golf cart.
Everybody got an issued car. One of these had a number on it. It looked like sort of like a police car. They were all white with black numbers on them. That was the first car that we actually had. And then we got our VW Bug over there, and that thing, by the time, after about a year and a half, not even, the salt in the air had corroded it. I mean, there was just rust everywhere. It was a disaster.
People would seriously drive these 30-year-old cars that were falling apart, rust holes in it, and barely just puttering around town. We called them camp cars, when really everyone could afford the nicest cars.
Oh yeah, hot water. If you wanted hot water, you had to turn off the water heater in your house, because the water heater's in the house and it's air conditioned. So that would eventually get cool, and you would have cool water in the water heater. So all the hot water came out of the cold tap because they laid the pipes right under the black asphalt. So you had really hot water coming out the cold tap, and you had cold water coming out the hot tap, and then you had the sweet water, which was the water you were allowed to drink, as opposed to the raw water.
And we had a man who would come twice a week. We called him the shrimp man. And he would come with these big baskets on his head. If you're at the end of the line of the street, you might not have the pick of it. So you try to get him. First time you try to talk to him and give him bucksheet, which means a little extra, and he'll come to you first so you can pick out the best fruit.
And it was usually the fish and the shrimp was still alive when he got to your door. He just laid it out at the back door. What do you want?
Yeah.
The other good fun part was like waiting for the vegetable truck. Once a week we had a vegetable truck, and you'd look for that little plume of dust in the distance, and it would come out and it's like, yes.
There was a guy that used to make sandals out of raw camel leather and the actual bottom of, cut out tire treads.
Just lots of things I remember. I remember my mother outside planting Bermuda grass by the blade individually. And then the sandstorm would come and it would all blow away. And her out and us out there trying to grow our carrots and our tomatoes and our bougainvillea branches.
You had the houses that sold the candy or the popsicles.
Yep.
Mahon selling the popsicles. We did a few things like that too. We'd sell cookies with the Minix or pizza. We'd make pizza and sell that.
Talking about last night how devastating it was to come home and have those yellow buses with no AC and the hard seats when we were used to our Mercedes buses with the AC in the bathroom.
Seats in the bathroom and the water on board with the cone cups.
I think of Christmas time in Saudi Arabia because all the holidays there were just so much more exciting. Like when I came back to Canada, it was a real disappointment to find out we only had 2 weeks off. And it was just a huge commercial thing over there. It's like everybody's mums were home and there were cookie exchanges and so many pageants. So I think Christmas in Saudi was what I missed the most.
The most unusual part of Christmas was we all got the same gifts in those days because there was no other shopping outside of Dhahran. And the company would bring in a few items and then all the parents would flock up there with their lottery number.
Well, there was a lottery to see who got to go first to buy toys.
They arranged to have someone dressed as Santa Claus. And 2 of the times I remember particularly, one time he came in on a camel, one time he came in on a donkey, and another time they actually had a helicopter. And so they would gather all the children around and we would all be there in a special place, and then Santa would come arriving, out of the sky or in some way or another, and then they would hand out presents for us.
Halloween, we trick-or-treating, and we wore Halloween costumes to school. We had a little parade, and we trick-or-treated for UNICEF. I don't know if they do that anymore, but that was a big thing. Who could get the most money for UNICEF? It wasn't about the candy then, it was about the money for UNICEF.
Everyone knew at 7 o'clock it was time to trick-or-treat. And so the whole camp would trick-or-treat at the same time.
When I think about the Aramco compound, I picture myself in a vehicle cruising through main camp, through the gates, around the residential area and the commercial area, into the hills, and then around that area. And either stopping at, my own house or stopping at the stud rag or somebody else's house or something like that. But I always picture myself moving through the compound as opposed to just being in one place. I get visions of many different things, but not necessarily just one thing. And like I said, I feel like I'm in the vehicle and I'm just looking out the window and I see various things that catch my eye and, make me recall certain memories.
The first class with a teacher by the name of Sam Whipple, with whom I still stay in contact. And there were 7 children in the first group. I was the only one who attended school on the opening day of the Aramco school systems for senior staff personnel in October of 1945.
I taught kindergarten from 1964 to 1969, and they were the best years of my life.
I can remember every single one of my teachers, and because Aramco is so selective with the recruitment of teachers, I had a lot of the best teachers.
I investigated all different places to teach, and Aramco was by far the best, I thought, and I think I was right. So I was hired, fortunately, and I went out on the Flying Camel in 59, August of 59, to teach in Dhahran. I loved teaching in the Aramco school system for many reasons.
For me, I always felt that I had complete academic freedom. I never felt that anyone interfered with what I chose to do with my students, and I was able to do wonderful, marvelous things with them. I taught English and history, and on many occasions had the same students for both of those classes, so I could integrate what I was doing.
The children were delightful. They were bright. They had been around the world 2 or 3 times. It was a national community, so the children had all different experiences. They were free of prejudice. The parents were very supportive.
Every family there is a 2-parent family. They all make substantial incomes. All the parents have an interest in their kids' education. So as you walk in there, things are going to be good.
When I saw how natural they were, bonded and yet very natural, this is my first year, my first few weeks, we had a pseudo town made out of shoe boxes, and the kids brought cars, the boys, and one fellow said, "Hey, look at your car. Where did you get that?" And the other one said, "Got mine in Berlin." He said, "Oh, you did? I got mine in Hong Kong." And the other fellow said, "Oh, I've got one something similar, but I got mine in London." But it's all so natural.
The other thing that was so marvelous was that I had more money to spend on my classes than you could ever dream of. I could have class sets of novels so that each child had a novel, and maybe I had 15 or 20 different sets of novels that made it so easy to present things to them, and it was wonderful.
One of the things I remember was how non-agenda based our education was. What mattered was the quality of the facts and how preserved those facts were. Our teachers didn't feel the need to fill our heads with propaganda because they knew eventually we were going to investigate it for ourselves. If you told me everybody in France acted this way and did this and ate this, I was going to go to France and I was going to find out. So you better be truthful. And therefore, our teachers didn't even go down that road with us. And I really, to all my teachers, I appreciate that.
I think we're also a lot less apt to be brainwashed, which is something that I feel really proud of, because personally I think that, being brainwashed is just really stupid.
My parents organized all of our vacations around what we were studying in school. So we studied Egypt, we went to Cairo. We studied Greek mythology, we were in Athens. The world was our museum, it was our history book. We had the best time. The school excursions that Aramco offered for children was incredible.
One of the things that I really appreciate was the field trips that we got to take. We got to take field trips to other countries. One of my favorite ones was within the country. We got to go to Riyadh for about a week, and we got to explore some of the ruins in Riyadh, and we got to actually have dinner, an authentic dinner in a Bedouin tent served by the local Saudis that live there. It's just a fabulous experience.
We did 3-week-long trips to different countries and learned about the culture and lived with families on site so that we had a great expectation of not only who the people were that we were learning about, not just about their culture, but actually living their culture.
Well, for me, it's turned me into a nomad. Since finishing high school, I haven't been in the same place for more than a year, pretty much. I changed jobs about as frequently as most people change their underwear. Not in a bad way. I mean, I've done better and better every time I move on. I get a better job.
I think for a teacher, that's the big test. What is the final product at the end? And most Aramco kids end up having productive, happy lives. Not always, but that's generally the case.
They had, for the children, they had just about every imaginable place to play. They had the bowling alleys, tennis courts, golf course, swimming pools.
Just needed your badge number. With that, you could do just about anything you wanted to do. The camp was self-sufficient. We had every facility you could think of.
Give to me your ID. That's something you never heard on camp.
No.
Brownies.
Pool hall, brownies, Girl Scouts. Yep.
And what was the date pit? Was it the date pit?
The date pit was in Abcake.
There were some really good athletes in Saudi Arabia growing up there, and we were very competitive. We all became very good swimmers, most of us at an early age, which is somewhat uncommon, I think, compared to the United States, because we swam all year round, all the time. We had very, very involved, organized swimming meets, good bowling tournaments. We all knew how to shoot pool by the time we were 8 or 10 years old, because there was a lot of downtime.
My dad taught me how to play golf in Saudi Arabia, and it's a very, very dirty sport over there because it's all sand fairways, all greens, rubber tee boxes, and if you're not finished playing golf by about 10:45 in the morning, you're cooked because it is so darn hot over there.
They had a BMX track, paved BMX track with full facilities.
Basketball, I played a lot of basketball, played a lot of baseball. Growing up when I was there in the early 70s, a lot of great baseball players. I had some great baseball players.
Being able to play pretty much 10 months out of the year in Saudi Arabia within baseball really developed your skills and allowed you to play, be able to capability-wise player pretty much amongst anyone in the world.
We had the Tri-D competitions for baseball and football. And it was a good rivalry like you'd expect among any middle school kids. But on the other hand, because we were all expats out there was also a sense that it was family. So even though you wanted to beat Abcake in the baseball game, they were also your friends.
I did a number of activities over in Saudi, but everybody's got the one that they kind of get into, and a hobby farm for me was a real big one. I guess horse people are kind of, we're our own different breed.
For me as a kid, it was always a place that I could go and be happy and ride in the desert and forget about any issues that had happened that day.
I was 20 years old before I realized there was horses that were not Arabians, and I was kind of disappointed.
From Dhahran and from the hobby farm, it was quite a ways to the beach. We weren't quite as lucky as the people up in Ras Tanura with the beach right there. So we'd like to ride our horses to the beach, but it became a desert ride, and the desert rides were a lot of fun.
As far as the people who rode horses in Saudi, I think we got to see a lot more of the exterior of the camp than most people, other than, I'd say, the people that rode motorcycles.
Yeah, we used to ride a lot of motorcycles together, Odysseys. They had the motorcycle track inside of camp we could all play around with, and then every once in a while we'd actually, as a group, go out, take our bikes out and go right out in the open country.
I had dance on Sundays after school. Yes, Sundays after school. With Miss Daisy, she was a good dance instructor, and I learned a lot. So when I came back to the States, I was way ahead of everybody else as far as dance goes.
Some of the best training I got was in the years that I lived in Saudi Arabia.
It was like the only dance to be in Dhahran.
If you didn't have a ticket to go to one of her dance performances, you were just out of luck.
It was awesome. It was a lot of fun to get together once, twice a week and practice your little recitals and then get up in front of the whole community, in front of your parents and like all the kids. We do our little dances with all of our costumes that were like shipped from America, from the States, and like our moms ordered the costumes and we got fitted for them.
So I can honestly say that I'm the dancer I am today because of the training I got over there. So that was unexpected.
Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts was a big deal at Saudi.
The best thing about Boy Scouts is that you got to go camping. And my favorite place for camping was a place called Scribner's Canyon out near Abcake. And this is a very, it would almost be like the Badlands region, sort of like the Roadrunner cartoons. They have big cliffs and steep gullies and such.
We'd camp and cook as groups. So we'd have large frying pans. We had 3-foot round frying pans. We'd scour out the inside, but then they were sooty and black on the outside. So we'd tie them behind the Jeeps and ride them across the dunes.
The Girl Scout campouts were awesome too. They used to have 4-day campouts for all the girls, and of course it was cold water we take showers with, but it's right on the shore of Half Moon Bay.
It was fun. We planned this ahead of time. All our meals were planned because we had to take everything with us, and they would bring in a big reefer truck, and that would keep our food refrigerated, and each day they'd come in with fresh water and whatever we needed.
We would go to the beach, cook out. In one part of the beach, the sand dunes were probably, I'm thinking now, probably 50 meters high, but maybe not that high. And we'd climb up the backside of the sand dune, and the big thrill was to then run off the top of the sand dune, do as many forward somersaults as you could do, hit in the sand, tumble down, and you'd go right into the Persian Gulf. There was a nice drop off there.
Beaches, well, the beach, going off on the sand dune and at night when it was like the weather was nice and balmy and everything, and it just the sand just like covering your body, oh, that was awesome.
Half Moon Bay Yacht Club was pretty much where we spent most of our weekends on Thursdays and Fridays back when I was growing up with my dad. He bought an old 21-foot Lightning class sailboat, and it didn't have a bottom on it. So one of the projects that my brother and my father and I did was, for one summer, is we put a plywood bottom and fiberglass that sailboat together. And then when we were done with that, we sailed around Half Moon Bay at the regattas, and gave us about 3 or 4 years of pure enjoyment in the summers.
Aramco offered Dow trips and a Red Sea trip to returning students. They do this all the time. And what happens, everyone would get on a boat. It was an old wooden Dow, which is an old boat. And we'd all go over to an island, right? There's an island, a lot of us would go to Drake Island, which was just amazing. They had sea turtles that were huge out there. Anyway, you'd all go out on this, putt out on this thing. It was a day trip. You get out there and you put on, everyone would be, hanging out and then in the sun, and then all of a sudden you just put on your tanks of scuba gear, you jump in the water, and you just get to be under there for a couple hours just scuba diving and seeing the most beautiful things, huge turtles, dolphins, all sorts of gorgeous sea creatures in gorgeous colors. It was just amazing. Some of the best diving, well, not some of the best, I've been everywhere, and Australia, even the Great Barrier Reef, and I'm telling you that this was the best diving in the world in terms of color and amount of small fishes and just the aliveness of the Northern Ocean.
I could never get over the color of the water and the fish. They couldn't pull me out. The boat was leaving and I was still in the water swimming.
Well, one of the biggest events in Aramco community was the annual AEA fair, and as a child, we used to count the days towards when that fair was, and our parents would give us 10 reals, and we'd run around and have the most fun, meeting up with friends and just doing stupid stuff on the rides and having so much fun. It was a blast.
I remember there were certain booths that had the good candy, so you'd always try to get there early. I remember one of them had Pop Rocks. Remember that candy?
Oh,
so you'd always beeline it right to the grape or the cherry, and they would always run out first. So you were unlucky if you didn't get there in time.
Every art group would have their own booth and their own float. You had the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the Hobby Farm had a float, and you wanted to be part of the parade. Everybody wanted to be in the parade or watch it. You did not go to the AEA Fair parade.
The AEA Fair was kind of, that one time during the year where, everyone would really come together as a community, and it was just amazing. It was kind of such a unique situation.
Rostanura had something, because it was a refinery town and a new refinery, the production was going up as units came online. So as an excuse for a big holiday, they'd have something like, I might not have these figures quite right, but the general idea is that we're going to celebrate 100,000 barrel day, which means they went 100,000 barrels of crude got processed. And then a year later, they celebrate 200,000 barrel day or 300,000 barrel day, and it kept climbing. And when they had these, they'd have big picnics on the beach, and there were like an American picnic with hot dogs and mustard and all that sort of thing, but there were two things that made them special for Saudi Arabia. One were the donkey races, and they would bring these big donkeys in from Qatif. Saudi Arabia in those days had donkeys, which I think if they had developed a breeding industry, they could have exported them all over the world because they were really big, strong donkeys. They almost looked like a small horse. And they were sometimes white, and they would be covered with red henna, which was the way they'd brand them. And you could sort of guess which donkey is going to win just by looking at how tall it was and the hips or something. You could sort of figure it out.
Definitely, I think one of the great things about being a Aramco Brat were all the youth centers we had and the game rooms we had, all the arcades and pool tables and ping pong. I think we all, got into that, and the cheese pizzas next door were a big hit.
Yeah, I think we all became semi-pros of playing Miss Pac-Man, Sinistar.
That's because the
Spy Hunter.
The price was 25 halal. So, you could play all day for about $5, which is a pretty good deal.
Living in Arabia, you did learn to entertain, and you learned to provide and create your own entertainment.
Oh, you had to make your own entertainment.
You had to make your own entertainment. And the people there who I met who were miserable and unhappy were people that didn't have that ability or didn't even want to foster it. Because I think that's one of the great things that sets people apart who've had that a great Aramco experience.
Talk about creating your own fun. We would call, my brother and I would get in our car, we'd bring a bunch of water balloons, and we'd call people ahead of time and say, hey, why don't you come outside and let's go out and hang out. Well, when they came outside, we'd peg them with water balloons from the car, drive off and leave, and then come back later, try to invite them out again, peg them. And it was just hilarious. That probably wouldn't fly anywhere else.
I just remember that long walk along the beach, that long sidewalk. In fact, I even have dreams about it still.
There was a game we used to play called Fox and Hound. And most of us didn't have horses, but we had friends that had horses. And we'd go out to Emhoff Gardens, we'd take the bus out, and we'd wait in our, kind of nervously as our friends saddled up their horses. And they would give us a half hour to go out into Emhoff Gardens and hide in the alfalfa and the bamboo shoots and all. And we'd hide, and then a half hour later, they'd ride out after us hunting. And there's nothing like a feel of terror, like running across an alfalfa field with somebody on horseback chasing after you at full gallop to get the excitement out of you. It's a tremendous experience, and no one else I know has ever had that.
Favorite food? Wow, it's a tough one. Hummus. I go with the classic hummus.
Have to be the shawarma.
Shawarmas! Yay, shawarmas.
Food was incredible, especially during Ramadan. The shawarmas.
We took advantage of the shawarmas.
Yeah.
They cooked shawarmas on the side of the road. That was always fun too.
The falafels.
Or like cheese bread or za'atar bread or that stuff. I really miss that stuff.
Cheese bread from Latif Bakery.
I remember there was just dripping cheese and there was nothing better. It only cost $1, so I'd have these fantasies about taking boxes back to boarding school.
It was like I think it was an Arab bread similar to pita bread. It was like that, and hummus.
Sambusa, shawarma. Sambusa's going to run a close second to shawarma. Very close second.
Has to be kubsa. Kubsa rice and kubsa, the way they bring it out on a big silver tray, like just a carcass without a head, that they put in an oven and they put every other smorgasbord in that rice with whole tomatoes and everything else, and they say, okay, they sit it down in front of you, you're sitting on the floor, and they say, eat it with your right hand. You're like, that's it.
On camp, we used to go to the dining hall a lot every Wednesday night with shrimp night, and we'd go to the dining hall and just eat shrimp.
Sambusa and kibbeh.
Remember the chickens?
In Medina, outside of Abcake, you could go get a whole chicken and a stack of fresh cooked bread in the stone oven for about 6 riyals, which is equivalent to about $2.
Well, I kind of missed the rice curry and camel. It was good.
Baba ganoush and hummus and all that.
The one thing that I really miss is the milk that came in the little cartons. Remember the from Holland, I think, it was very very strong milk.
And lion bars. Those were really good.
Miranda.
Team. Africola.
Oh, Orangina, but Orangina they have
Oh,
these
I
days.
love Orangina.
The kuftas.
Pinto.
Oh, man.
Shawarmas. Oh man, yeah.
Shawarmas. God, I love the shawarmas.
Tabbouleh, hummus with couscous and kabsa.
Waffles. Shawarmas, man. No. Nice piece of meat, just cut it off there, just eat it.
I mean, you can't get the same kind of food here. You really can't.
Falafel stuffed in the pitas. Much better than chips. Debate to be continued.
It was a shocker going from Saudi to boarding school. At first you're excited.
Oh, yeah.
And then once you got there, you're like, man, my friends, I miss my friends.
What an incredible change.
All the kids went away to the schools in the U.S. or somewhere in Europe without their parents. Can you imagine nowadays sending a 14-year-old to the other side of the world saying, Johnny, here's your ticket, here's your passport, here's some American Express traveler's checks. Make sure you get to school all right. It just doesn't happen. We were pretty much asked to be responsible for ourselves at a very young age and responsible for your friends, making sure that they get to where they needed to go at the same time. And I think that kind of a growth period at a very young age gave a lot of us the ability to succeed later on in life because we were able to take responsibility for ourselves.
And I was sent right off to school in Switzerland in September. We got there in July. And I went to Montana College in Zugerberg, Switzerland. It's very unique. It was up on the top of a mountain. I learned how to ski very well. Had some very important people there. And being a brat, you get to see a lot of the world and you get to meet a lot of very influential people. The King of Spain today, Juan Carlos, he was there. Mussolini's grandson was there. And my roommate's great-great-grandfather was Walter Reed. And his father was a brigadier general in the U.S. Army in Wurzburg, Germany, which we got to visit during spring break. And get around two teenage kids driving around in a staff car, everybody saluting at us. It was quite unique.
Well, Aramco used to have their own airline for quite a few years back in the older days. And they flew, I don't know, what kind of planes were they?
DC-6s.
DC-6s. There was the Flying
Maybe
Camel,
7s.
the Flying Gazelle, and the Flying Oryx.
Our flights, we would always, the kids would come together, we'd all meet in New York, and then we'd get a group together and we'd go into Amsterdam. And you have to remember that these were kids that started out on their own at 14 years old. And we would always gather in New York and then take our trips back. And coming back to the States, often we would take side trips through New York or through the Europe, just however we wanted to go.
Kind of took a few breaks to figure out so what are we going to do with ourselves for these 3 months of summer, and so kind of had a lot of time to kill, and we generally did it in some interesting ways. Waking up every day around crack of noon and heading to the pool, soaking up some sun, maybe playing some water volleyball, hitting the snack bar and getting a sambusa and a cheese pizza and then relaxing through the dinner hours and heading out to the student recreation center, maybe playing some volleyball, pool, ping pong until around 11 or so, heading over to people's houses and just having a good time.
And we'd have these tri-D dances, especially in the summer when we came back from high school and college, and we'd all get together and people would get on the old Kenworth buses, which weren't air conditioned, and drive across to Dhahran or Abkhak, and every kid in school would go up for this big dance and spend the night with other friends up there.
They would bring in different bands from the States, and they would be there for like a whole month, or actually for the whole summer. And 1 month it might be in Abkhak, 1 month it would be in Dhahran, another month it'd be in RT.
I think almost every brat was always looking forward to the tri-D dances during the summer. Definitely.
I just remember how Aramco really took care of us. They took the time to put programs together to support the returning students in just so many things we wanted to do. They even offered us jobs and paid us good money to work for the company.
I guess what's funny to me is how annoyed all of my friends get of me constantly talking about my experiences living abroad.
I think we took a lot of stuff for granted and just thought of the way that we lived as normal. And it wasn't until you went away to school that you became exposed for the first time to this idea that people live different ways and they might not understand the way you grew up. I think that's given us a tremendous advantage in understanding immigrants and people from other cultures.
As I grew older, I realized one of my biggest dreams was to see the full Saudi picture and to get outside of Aramco and leave Dhahran and see some other places within Saudi. And I'm a free spirit. I wanted to do that by myself. And so I bicycled around a little bit, and I also took a dirt bike, and I rode this dirt bike from Dhahran to Greece. And in Saudi, I did a big loop. I went to Bereda, which is like supposedly the farm belt of Saudi Arabia, and met up with some really cool Saudis there. And they invited me in. I spent the night there. They fed me so much food, kabsa and rice and chicken and strawberry milkshakes and stuff. I was treated like royalty. It was a really cool experience, and I went all the way to the Red Sea coast and drove up north and stopped off at every little village along the way, and it was the most amazing trip I've ever had.
My father got his doctorate. His project for his communication doctorate was to build or rebuild the Dhahran telephone exchange. And, I don't know, it seemed like it took forever. I'm sure it didn't, but he worked on it for a long time because I know my mother used to complain about him going off to Dhahran all the time and not taking her shopping. Actually, she didn't have a problem with him going, but all the great, Dammam and Kuba were in the middle where all the great shopping is, and she always wanted to go.
The Gold Souks were a favorite place for me because I was a young man, and I was always interested in getting names in Arabic for my girlfriends and buying gold and jewelry and just the sheer quantity of it and the display and the lights, and coupling that with all of the sounds and smells of Khobar and Dammam were just so special for me at the time.
I remember the first mall that we used to shop at when I was younger was Al Shula, but at some point the Al Shula mall burnt to the ground. And now they have this mall called the Rashid, and it is just a massive castle. It's the most insane mall I've ever seen in my life.
There actually was a JCPenney's when I left there. There was a JCPenney in the mall there, which blew our minds. So as years went on, it wasn't as necessary to wait until you went to the States to do your shopping. It's now grown considerably in that aspect over there, and you can pretty much buy whatever you need.
Speaking just for myself, my family made a habit of taking bus rides, going to places like Hofuf, Katif, going to the markets, getting in. I mean, they're like the camel markets in Hofuf were amazing. It's just thousands and thousands. It's really funny that my family's into ranching, so to see the Saudi agriculture and livestock, it's kind of cool to see that from a completely different perspective.
Somewhere in 1964, we went out on vacation and we flew to England and bought a Land Rover because it was becoming popular to go out in the desert exploring and just finding artifacts and things like that. And so we drove the Land Rover all the way from England down through Europe, through Turkey, through Syria and Jordan, into Iraq, and into Saudi Arabia. And that was, me and my sisters and my mom and dad, that was quite an adventure.
All through the years, we've done all these trips every year to the Rubicali, particularly around Christmas time.
And we've never, I don't think we've ever missed a year. Now, just every December, we go out. And I have to say, quite honestly, that's probably one of the most beautiful places on earth is Rubicali. And not enough people get to experience it.
The places you got to go living over there were just incredible. And I think that's one of the things that everyone always remembers.
For Aramcons, the reason why people fall in love with them so much is they're so interesting, and they're always, bringing up something because they've experienced everything firsthand. They've gone to those countries, and they've actually talked with the people,
they lived in those places and actually they weren't scared of the actual environment they were in.
Hong Kong, Singapore, Hawaii, and then coming to the States for a while and traveling all around, and then we went to Europe, and this was all on one trip.
It makes the world seem like a smaller place to you. The whole boarding school experience, every time I flew to or from Saudi Arabia, for any reason, whether it was going on vacation somewhere or going back to my boarding school, you always ran into other Aramcons in the airports, whether it was in Amsterdam or at London Heathrow. You always ran into people that you knew.
It was just a good experience, and it just made me more worldly and not scared to travel all over the world.
Nothing was ever better than having that experience. And the travels that we had then and the travels that we do now and the way that I'm raising my children because of the experience that we had, just taking them and showing them the culture and having them live in the different areas that we go to, not just to see what it's like a Disneyland tour, but just to get to know some people and learn about the culture and learn about the world.
We don't really like to watch the news because we don't feel that the news is actually giving us an accurate portrayal of what's actually happening on the ground. And I think that's a big disservice for most of the West. And I think their own media is just as guilty as the Western media is not actually portraying what's actually going on the ground in Saudi Arabia, on the ground in Kuwait, in the UAE, in Oman.
The media oftentimes tries and give just a partial picture, kind of immediate. They serve an immediate sensation. You know, they try and run the story and get the story out fast, and in doing so, sometimes they don't get the whole side of it.
If you're watching the news, I want you to think about President Bush holding the hand of Crown Prince Abdullah when he came to visit in Texas just recently, holding his hand and walking with him to the house. This would be the number one way for two men to show their respect for each other in a situation that has no words. And if you want to learn about the culture, if you want to know what's really going on, these are the things that you have to ask about. I think the media should be talking to people who lived in Saudi Arabia, who know what real Saudis are like and where their hearts are.
And the kind of coherence that existed between what we call Aramco expatriates and mainly the Westerners, whether European or Americans, it actually was a kind of atmosphere and living conditions where it was fruitful to both. The Saudis actually liked to work with the Americans. They enjoyed actually the cultural, habits of the American people. The Saudi people are very hospitable and friendly people, and there was no problem in having the two societies really blend in a very productive and coherent matter. I think what you hear a lot about in the media is a complete misconception. I don't think that there was a better relationship in any society than existed, better than what existed between the Westerns and Americans, Europeans, and the Saudi people.
I think that the media needs to take a look at what its true purpose and definition in a journalistic sense, what the true definition of journalism is. Because if you look in colleges, the old colleges of old would teach that you tell the whole story and you don't insert your opinion. And I think today's media has gone from a true reporting a story to more of an editorial on the story.
We don't get the Saudi side here in America. All we get is the negativity. And as a person in the media, it hurts. We don't want to hear all the good things that are going on. We don't want to hear about all the people that are trying their hardest to, create better business relations. They're trying to change their country. Saudi is in flux right now. They've had a growing period of civil rights and elections for the first time this year than any other year in since. And it's difficult to sit back and listen to the headlines of negativity between what insurgents and what other militant people do, when really the average Joe who owns a shop or the average person just wants their kids to go to school, and in a way they see the prosperity that's going on within their own country as a Western thing, not just an American thing, but as a prosperity thing. And I think that there's a small minority, just like here in America, there's a small minority of people that don't want change and that are negative to anything that's not status quo. And I think in Saudi, there's more social change in Saudi Arabia that's happening right now than there is even in our own country.
Many people today don't really understand, there's stereotypes. They say, oh, okay, you lived in a tent or you rode a camel to school or something silly. But once you explain it to them, and they kind of understand it, you just have to, I guess, give them some more details, and they soon understand, what it was like for me to live in Saudi Arabia. That it wasn't like it's depicted on TV.
I also think that Aramco Brats have a sense of where their place in the world, and I think they probably might be more sympathetic to international causes, like perhaps the tsunami disaster, or what's going on in Iraq, or any other numerous political events.
When all this terrorist stuff came about and everyone was all anti-Muslim, anti-this, I wasn't, because I knew what they were like.
People of different cultures are actually working together, they're actually getting along, they're actually learning from one another. So we wish that the rest of the world could see what we see and not what they see. And if they could only remove the filter and the prism that they looked at American and Arab relations through, I think the world would be a lot better off.
Leaving, I cried. I was really sad having to leave all my friends and knowing that I'd never be able to go back. It was really stressful.
I was miserable. It was the worst thing. I wanted to go back. That's when I really learned to appreciate where I was raised, born and raised.
It was a hard transition, for some of the ones, and I've talked to other people that did not have an easy time assimilating back. Coming back to the United States was culture shock, because it was totally different from the environment that we grew up in.
I remember leaving Saudi Arabia August 14th, 1990, under the pretense that I was going to see it again. We were evacuating Desert Storm, but this was still just going to be like a short vacation. And as it turns out, I never saw it again. I never stepped foot inside again. That, I can honestly say that torments me. And it has for a little over 16 years. I dream about it often, and every time it seems a little bit more real. My alarm goes off.
I said, that was my home.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody loves their home. It was my home.
I always think that the reason why I miss it so much is because I took advantage of the times that I had while I was there. Because if I wouldn't have taken advantage of it, if I wouldn't have known how much I had, I think that's kind of like thinking in the past. I think the reason why we did know what we had when we were there, and we lived it in the moment, and that's why we miss it so much.
It's given me a lot of opportunity to see the world and to grow much more than I think I would have if I had lived in the States all my life.
Just in general, since leaving Saudi Arabia and coming to the States, as well-meaning as most of the people that I've met here in the States have been, a lot of times there's just there's no understanding. The experiences we've had are so unique that you can't really relate them.
And it's very hard to try and pass on to someone else the experiences that we had growing up.
Trying to explain it to someone back here in the States is frustrating.
You can't. They don't get it.
I don't think unless you were there you could truly understand what it was like, the chance to live there with American people, yet experience the other culture.
That was a great place. It was just a wonderful opportunity. The majority of the people
we speak to who are not part of the Aramco Brat community cannot understand or fathom the liberties we had, plus the opportunities we had, much less the responsibilities and the requirement for us to grow very early, very independently.
It was a very big part of who I am and what I am, and an exciting part.
We were so different. We came back to the States, and I would tell people I was from San Francisco because it was such a complicated question to answer. Where are you from?
The answer that I give today is that I'm from everywhere. I'm a citizen of the world.
But I really made some good friends off the bat, friends for life, friends that are here today, and I wouldn't trade that for the world.
I find it's very rare that people keep in touch with people they went to school with from kindergarten, when they were 4 or 5 years old up until I'm now 40, and have quite a close circle of friends that I've been able to remain in contact with.
I think living overseas made us very patriotic. I think as a group we're probably more patriotic than a lot of Americans of the same age. But it also made us appreciate other cultures.
We all developed a real appreciation for Saudi culture and their religion, Islam. And the ones that we met developed an appreciation for our culture. They were very thankful, I think, for what we were doing to contribute to the country. And we were very thankful for their hospitality, that we could be there and we could help in their development.
And I guess I would like to admit that as I was growing up, I didn't appreciate the experience I had. And every year that I've gotten older, I realized how fortunate I was.
And I feel very fortunate to have had an opportunity to have learned so much, seen so much.
Oh, the whole environment, it was one of the great things, and it's a beautiful thing.
I feel so lucky that I had the opportunity to live with all of them and be their friend. I can't really say friend because we were more than friends. Like, we hang out together all the time. We were neighbors. We went to the same programs, the same recreations. I spent a lot of time with them. I even sometimes spent more time with them than I spent with my family.
Still, this is my 52nd summer there, so.
The perspective that was given to me as an individual to experience that is so broad and wide that I think it's made me a more tolerant person when it comes to diversity in culture and other people's personalities and perhaps ways of life. So that's something I think is non-tangible that we all share amongst ourselves, and I don't know if we actually consciously acknowledge that, but we definitely have it going on in an unspoken manner between ourselves.
Really unified my entire family to have the experience of being in Saudi, and I wouldn't trade the experience for the world. It was the best thing I ever did.
This was where you were going to have an association that would last your entire lifetime, and when you felt like you were alone or you felt like you had nothing or your family was gone, or I don't know what the circumstance, but you could think back that there were 700, 800, 1,000, 2,000 people that had the same upbringing as you did, lived in the same places as you did, and they were your family.
That's why I love these reunions, and it's each time I see one that I hadn't seen, and in the last reunion, I feel as if I've seen a member of my family, except they were 5 and now they're 40 plus. So, but we still have that same feeling when we see each other.
But that's Aramco. You know different people, and they know someone else, and then when you get together, you're like family. And the Aramco family is extremely important. It's been vital in many, many ways.
And I recommend it to anybody again. It was fun. It was really, truly fun.
People, the friends we made, and the connections we made.
It's memories that I'll probably never forget in my life. And it ties into these reunions that we do every 2 years. You come back and you see the faces of the people that made it happen, and it's just a fantastic environment that we grew up in, and a bond that we'll probably never forget or let go of.
I wish more people had the opportunity to live in another culture, because I think it would contribute to peace in the world.
I'm 68 years old now, and I say I've done because of this experience. It was life-changing for me because we were just an average family up in New England when we lived there, and when we came up, we got to travel the world and got to meet a lot of very nice people and see all the things in the world that most people don't ever see and appreciate, and it really broadened my horizon and gave me the self-confidence and the enthusiasm that I have to do what I want to do, and consequently I've been pretty successful in my life, and I attribute it to my father bringing us to Saudi Arabia and making our life completely different.
Finally, we have an opportunity to share what we have held inside for so long and what people have, refused to or hesitantly listened to us about.
I think it's like my personal mission almost to bore the heck out of the world with how great Saudi Arabia and America are, and us getting along, how great their culture is, and the things that you're not hearing, because I think the world needs to hear it. Most of the world likes happy endings. If you do, I've got one for you. And they lived happily ever after. If I have anything to do with Arab-American relations and what I want to pass on to future generations, I'm going to make sure that happens. I'm an Aramco brat.
Middle Eastern expat, mixed bread into forever brat pack. Yuppie comedy with hospitality for a laugh track. And our seasons, they all had breaks to get back to the places we came from and best times that we lacked, but still we all loved it so. And if you had to ask me where I'd like to go, I'd say back to the dunes, where the only things untouched were car hoods and cartoons. Take a dip in a pool, and I didn't consider a day off school. I'd go back to the beach, take that beat up car just as far as it reached, and with a friend I'd act a fool. But it wouldn't be the same, 'cause I was there without you. Salaam alaikum, tell your mama near my city, marhaba. You say the will of God, and see me, I'm always thinking inshallah. I miss the hummers, flows in the swarm of stairs, separated by words, but live in similar ways. Damn, I miss it so. And if you went off and asked me where I'd like to go, I'd say back to the dunes, take a long bus trip and snap some pictures of roads, ride a horse through the desert, before we cross the Jebel. Go grab a canyon, climbing a palm tree and build a fort in a banyan. And I'm sure I'd break a rule or two, but it wouldn't be the same, 'cause I was there without you. Been a lot of years, yet this feeling's building stronger than ever. I tried like hell to get back, but I guess I proved I just ain't that clever. Not for the lack of trying, know the tears I've cried while eating over some brown singing never say goodbye. Been gone so long, I'm low. And if I had the chance, you know where I would go. I'd go back to the dunes, where when nothing happened, it happened too soon. Say November to June, over sinking skies in those bright orange moons. I cruise around just to see how the hell home's been since it's been minus me. But I'm sure I'd see a different view, 'cause it couldn't be the same if it exists without you. No, it couldn't be the same if it exists without you.
It's a coin toss, one let me hear. See, I was born in an oasis from a great emir in the Aramco womb until the age of 16, living the American dream with the Saudis swing. But sandstorms kind of funny, you see, because they crave your disciplined independency. But I'm a comedy of child raised by angels' wings without ethnocentric guys I came to be. From every culture we got a smorgasbord beliefs, because no religion is wrong if it brings in a peace. This time I never emotion is all your memories. I'll listen to your story if it lets you breathe. But this thought is groove since a prayer call. It's gonna hit your hometown like the great Jamal. And like art, I sprung from nature, and with the sixth rhythm, much the grand creator say,
I like chicken cubs, cheese bread and honey love now in S-A-S-A. Some people don't like the custom, but for some reason I love them in S-A-S-A. Some people like California, but I like the water warmer in S-A-S-A.
Palm trees, kicking back in the breeze with my Beto brothers and my cardamom tea. And now we're cruising to the Rubicon, and it's coming to the land of the Arabian sand. And now I'm riding on an Arabian horse, see crescent moons and endless dunes. So all these memories coming back to you.
Sunny days by the pool, girls I'd like to tickle. Cruising camp cars, eating homemade popsicle. Go to the soup, we can eat ta'oud. Shop with my friends, hookah and ta'oud. I need to impress around the world. Arabic necklace for American girl. Now I stick it in the golden ghetto. Cause I'm truly Beto. Make it ticket chicken to Aramco tempo. Join this Jebel rebel. Camel cruise, a life ordinary. Smoking cigarettes down at the commissary. Nerf wars, golf parks, we push maturity. Chase down Kings Road by security. I feel like Aragon with the best of Teflon. More like Mithril, could this be for real?
Say, I like chicken cubs, cheese bread and honey love now in S-A-S-A. Some people don't like the custom, but for some reason I love them in S-A-S-A. Some people like California, but I like the water warmer in S-A-S-A.
My heart feels kind of like the city of Rome. I keep trying to connect all my friends to home. See, I like Luke, but I relate with Vader, cause I can't control my instinctive nature to be craved. You remember a decadent past, a lifeline between friends, is it just not last? Assalamu alaikum, alaikum assalam. Peace be upon you in your everyday song.
Say, I like chicken cubs, cheese bread and honey love now in S-A-S-A. Some people don't like the custom, but for some reason I love them in S-A-S-A. S.A. Some people like California, but I like the water warmer in S.A. S.A. Say, I like chicken kafsa, cheese bread and honey love now in S.A. S.A. Some people don't like the customs, but for some reason I love them in S.A. S.A. Some people like California, but I like the water warmer in